So, my dear friends, once again, a very heartfelt welcome to you. And today I'll talk, hopefully briefly, about the topic which Karen so beautifully articulated, service, the way of service, and also about honor. I love metaphors. So when I think of service, I think of those words by the 13th century sage Rumi, who said, please be a lamp, a lifeboat, or a ladder to God's creation. I love the other utterance also. Come, dwell at my door and be homeless. Come, dwell at my door and be homeless. Don't pretend to be a candle. Be a moth, so that you might taste the savor of life and contemplate the sovereignty hidden in servitude. You know, the Quran speaks repeatedly about righteous deeds again and again and again. And in fact, there's some wonderful verses that says, what takes you to heaven is not your gender, not your religion, but your righteous deeds. And I love the insight of mystics who say that, you know, Jamal, when you die, or when anybody dies, your wealth, your titles will have to be left behind at your palace, if that's what you're focused on. And it's lovely that your community, your family, your friends, they are with you, but they can accompany you only up to your gravesite. But beyond that, what takes you further is a record of your righteous deeds. And of course, I want to say this is emphasized in every religion. In Hinduism, they say that this way of service is actually a path, a unique path to what Christians might call salvation. The Eastern traditions will say freedom. Islam will say surrender to God. And that's called karma yoga. Karma means action. The only qualification is if you want to be enlightened through service, when you serve, remember, please do not, I repeat, do not be attached to the fruits of the service, to the money or the prestige it brings you. In Buddhism, I love the story that the Buddha, he attained nirvana. He went to nothingness, to heaven, but he returned to earth to serve for the liberation of all sentient beings. I love the words of the Dalai Lama, who said, you know, please, always in the act of service, help others, help others. And if you cannot help them, I beg you, please, do not hurt them. So just be with that for a few moments. Okay, the second point I want to make is the Quran says, if out of service you are giving, remember some points. Give freely of what you love. That's real giving. Second says the Quran, give to those who ask and those who don't ask. And thirdly, the Quran says, when you give quietly, if you can. For this will atone, the Quran says, for some of your wrongdoings. About the first one, give freely of what you love. The Quran has another elaboration, literally and metaphorically, but metaphorically about giving. The Quran says, try to understand this, a hand that is always open is as crippled as a hand that is always closed. There is a rhythm, there's a beauty, there's an art to giving. About the second one, give to those who ask, who don't ask. I love the story of the mullah That's the fictional 13th century character through whom many profound truths are conveyed. And he talks about, don't be so dramatic about your asking. So what is this? The story is the mullah is high up on the roof, fixing something in the roof. And somebody from downstairs, from down in below says, mullah, there's something I want to tell you. It's very important. The mullah says, what is it? And the person says, please come down, I want to tell you. And the mullah makes his way down laboriously. It's very sort of perilous, goes around, comes down this way, and finally comes down and says, what is it? And the man says, I'm a beggar. I'm a very poor man. My family's starving. Can you please give me something? And the mullah looks very sympathetic, and he was very thoughtful. He says, okay, follow me. And the person is excited. So together they again make the journey perilously all the way up to the roof. And the mullah tells this person, and the mullah says, I'm very sympathetic, but the truth is, I really have no money this year. I cannot give you anything. Please come next year. And the man says, why couldn't you tell me when I was down there? The mullah says, why couldn't you ask me your question when I was up here? Just be with that sort of funny story. The third one, about give quietly. There's several stories in several traditions. I love the story both in Buddhism and Sufism, where this person who feels so touched by this path of service goes to the master and says, oh, master, I've decided I want to give all my money away. I will sign all the deeds to my property. I'll give you all my livestock. I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll do that. And the master says, son, keep the goods, keep the livestock, keep the money. Just give me your eye. Just be with that story. How does that impact you about being of service? The Quran goes on to talk about service, saying, if you really want to be of service, you have to climb the steep path. Don't take the easy way out. And the Quran says, what can I tell you about the steep path? And it's very significant that the first line of the steep path is, can you free a slave from bondage? Yes, give to the poor, to those who are mired in the dust. But the first one, the critical one is, can you free a slave from bondage? Jamal, it's wonderful you give. It's wonderful you pray. But if you really structural, fundamental changes, do you have the courage to help those who are oppressed? Do you have the courage, Jamal? Those who are trapped by injustice. So Prophet Muhammad said, for those who are oppressed because of injustice, he said, use your hands if you want to be of service, meaning do something, get engaged, take action. Well, if you cannot do that because it's inconvenient, Prophet Muhammad said, at least use your voice, speak out. Do you have the courage to speak out against this injustice? If you don't have the courage to do that, yes, says the Prophet Muhammad, pray from your heart. But the Prophet Muhammad said, in this case, this is the lowest form of faith. Just be with that for a few moments. You know, Islamic mystics, they would really want to explain and go deeper. Talk about different angles of what did the Quran mean about free a slave from bondage. It also means, can you free yourself from your conditioned biases, human weaknesses? You know, several times I've talked about the chapter in the Quran called Abasa, meaning he frowned. What was that about? Well, if you remember, uh, in the 7th century, when the community of Islam was a very tiny, embryonic, fragile community, and the Prophet needed military alliances just to survive, he was talking to this very powerful tribal chieftain to have a military alliance when suddenly a poor blind man interrupted the Prophet to ask a question about the Quran. And the Prophet must have said something because the other person was blind, but the Quran says that the Prophet frowned. Like, can't you see I'm so busy talking about something existential for our survival? Can't you hear that? That evening, a revelation descended upon the Prophet Muhammad. And the words are, to the person who came to you with an inner awe, him you disregarded. And the other person, the tribal chieftain, who was pompous, who considered himself self-sufficient, to him you paid attention. This should not be so. And the Prophet Muhammad asked for forgiveness when he went to the person and said, please forgive me. And it is said he appointed him as the governor of Medina for a very short time. So this is about our human conditioning. Can I free a slave from bondage within myself? The story in the traditions, in the Islamic tradition about Abraham, peace be upon him, the father of the monotheistic traditions. The story is that every morning he would have breakfast, but he wouldn't have breakfast until he invited a stranger. He would call somebody. And one day he called somebody from the street and said, please, I can't open my breakfast without prayers and until I shared my food with a stranger. Happened to be a Zoroastrian. And when that person opened the prayer, he said, please do the prayer, said Abraham. And he started by worshiping the fire. At least that's what the story goes. And Abraham was infuriated, being the fierce monotheist. And he drove him away and said, get out of here. You're a fire worshiper. Again, a revelation to the prophet Abraham. Abraham, what are you doing? Ibrahim, what are you doing? As the mystics, have you come to unite or to sever? I have fed this man for 70 years and you couldn't even feed him one breakfast? Immediately, Prophet Abraham begged for forgiveness. Maybe one third one, you know, the person I admire so much, the Buddha, enlightened being. But even the Buddha, this enlightened being, when he was asked, can women become monks? Because that's the highest level, being a monk, the Buddha said, no, women cannot be monks. He took his beloved stepmother, his mother had died, to convince him, no, what you're saying is incorrect, no matter how enlightened you are. So I say all of this to take to heart, if you really want to be of service, the Quran is suggesting we have to free a slave from bondage, have the courage, overcome our human weaknesses, our conditioned biases. Just be with that for a few seconds. A few more points. The Quran also says, can you honor God? There's a story in the Quran about some very scholarly Jewish theologians who wanted to test the Prophet Muhammad in the 7th century and asked him some very difficult theological questions. And the Prophet Muhammad said, I'll give you the answer tomorrow. Because he was used to asking questions and a revelation would come. But tomorrow came, no revelation from God. He had no answer to those theologians. The next day, no revelation. Finally, a revelation came with some fantastic answers where the theologians were very satisfied with the answers, fully satisfied. But the revelation said these answers, and the reason it did not come earlier is because you did not say, Insha'Allah. meaning if God wills, by grace of God. So we have to also honor God. Therefore, for Muslims, the word inshallah, by grace of God, if God wills, has probably now sadly become the most abused word. If I don't want to do something else, yes, I'll do that, inshallah, if God wills. So the story of the mullah, it's Eid. Eid is like Christmas in Christianity. So he goes to the tailor to make clothes for his children. And the tailor says, come next week, it'll be done. And he wants the clothes to be done in time for the festival. He goes next week and the tailor says, I'm so sorry, I couldn't do it, but give me 2 more days and inshallah, it'll be done. 2 more days, he goes again, come next day, inshallah, it'll be done. Finally, the mullah's angry, says, he uses some curse word and says, tell me how long it'll take if you keep God out of it, if you don't honor God. Again, just be with that, please, for a few moments. My dear friends, in being of service, we have to honor animals. The Quran says, animals are communities just like your own. And of course, for me, in the last quarter of my life, I speak repeatedly about reducing our dependence, our addiction to meat. It is such an act of violence. I'll just repeat what I always quote, that song or that insight by the Beatles, who said, if slaughterhouses had walls made out of glass, we'd all be vegetarians. Anyhow, may we honor animals. If we eat meat, may we offer our deepest gratitude. And by the way, I'm not a vegetarian, but I'm eating less and less and less meat. And my request to everybody is, please change over to plant-based meat. And the meat being produced now in the next few years, more commonly, is by culturing of meat in the laboratories. It's real meat, but it's without killing the animals. May we honor nature. I know we all know that. So maybe I'll just tell a story. I'll repeat a story which I love. I follow that, the progress of this story. There's a village in India, northern India, called in the state of Rajasthan. In this particular village, it's a very dry village. There is crime. There is patriarchy. So what the elders decided when they got together, they said, every time a female child is born, every time a girl is born, let us all collectively plant 111 trees. By now, they have close to 500,000 trees, by the way. So over the last few years, a baby girl was born, the entire village would get together and plant 111 trees. And today, after 500,000 trees, what has been phenomenal is the place has become green, number one. Number two, crime rate has amazingly decreased, and patriarchy has significantly diminished just by planting trees. So just be with that for a few moments. Okay, quickly ending with just 2 more points now. What have I learned ever since my hair was black, ever since my association with Interfaith Community Sanctuary? I've been coming up, I'm pointing this way, up those steps for over 20 years. I've worked with the Interfaith Amigos, Rabbi Ted Falcon, Pastor Don McKenzie. I've learned that if I really want to be of service in every way, if I really want to honor the other from a spiritual perspective, I have to raise my consciousness. There is no shortcut. If you want to solve the problems of today, social justice, injustices, planetary degradation, individually and collectively, we all have to raise our consciousness. You know, Ted, in all our, we do presentations all over the country. Ted says, you know, Jews say that we are the chosen people. Don says that I am the way, which means that only through Christianity can you attain heaven. Muslims say the Quran is a superior book. But Ted goes on to say that, you know, when I say that we are the chosen people, we are the chosen people for the way of the Torah, just as Christians are the chosen people for the way of the Christian scriptures. Muslims are the chosen people for the way of the Quran. Don goes on to explain the word I am really means God. God is the way. Going through divine principles, divine attributes. I say, when Muslims say the Quran is uniquely superior, don't forget what the Quran says about Jews, Christians, and Muslims. We are people of the book. It's always in the singular. Always book, meaning the Quran is a sacred book, just as the Christian scriptures are, the Jewish scriptures are. Just be with that for a few moments. The other 2 points I've learned from my Interfaith Amigos, my association, is how critical it is in this time of polarization, this chasm, this great divide, to really come to know the other on a human level. Can I practice, as I always say, 3 cups of tea? Listen, respect, connect. Can I really listen? An adversary is someone whose story I have not listened to. Can I respect? And this is very critical in our times today. When I'm dealing with someone I'm disagreeing with, I don't like this person's behavior. The person's behavior is unacceptable, but the person's being is Christ nature, Buddha nature, Elohim nature, Allah nature. And as I take the right action, and we have to take the right action, as I take the right action, can I keep this person's being, essence in my heart? Can I make a differentiation between behavior and being? And just this differentiation can shift heaven and earth. That's respect. Last one is connect. Can I really, through my creativity, create the environment where I connect with the other on a human level? This universe is made out of stories, not atoms. Lastly, what have I learned from being at Interfaith Community Sanctuary for over 20 years? That yes, my friends, we can create a beloved community. We can create friendship, not just based on outer similarities, but on inner similarities, a kinship of spirit, which is why it doesn't matter what our religion or no religion, we can still share worship services of the other. I've learned that by being at Interfaith Community Sanctuary, it is critical to develop a learning community where we connect with the other to grow in spiritual maturity, become more aware, more compassionate, more loving, deepening the capacity to forgive. You know, the Prophet Muhammad said, your spiritual practices are only as good as those of your closest friends. Therefore, choose your friends wisely. I've learned that for governance, what you call the board, where you make decisions, it's so important for it to be non-hierarchical. And by the way, the recent research shows that in our lives, if our lives are non-hierarchical, we live a longer life. Also, a very critical point I've learned about being in service and honoring the other is when we have diversity, it doesn't matter what it is, in religion, in politics, in culture, in race, it is important to acknowledge it, but go beyond that. Accept it, honor it, and most important of all, this is the most profound consciousness, we have to celebrate our differences, our diversity. So I would just sum it up by saying at ICS, Interfaith Community Sanctuary, literally and metaphorically, I have learned to laugh and dance. And now I will end with a quotation from Tagore about service, who says, I slept and dreamt life was joy. I awoke and found life was service. I served and behold, lo, service was joy. My friends, just be with that for a few moments. And I'll do a short meditation. Close your eyes. Focus on your nostril. And simply be present with your breath as you inhale and as you exhale, just this much. A few more moments, simply mindfulness of your in-breath and the out-breath. And now, my friends, let go of this. This time, focus on the lowest part of your spine and make an intention to send a beautiful cord of divine light, any color, from the base of the spine, going down deep into Mother Earth, all the way down, deep, 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 connecting us to the womb of Mother Earth. Feel that connectedness, rootedness. Let go of that. Focus now on the crown of the head and intend to send a beautiful cord of divine light going upwards, any color, way up, higher, higher, piercing those mysterious realms and connecting us to the heart of heaven. Feel that, please. And now let go of that. And this time, focus on your heart, the wellspring of love, light. And from the core of your heart, make an intention to pour out light and love in an outward, expansive direction, radiating, pouring, gushing out light and love from the heart in an outward, expansive direction. And may I do this practice of pouring out through intention, light and love from the core of my heart in my meditative state and also in my waking state as often as possible. This is one of the best ways to open up the heart and connect with God's creation, sending light and love, pouring out from the heart. I'll do a chant and just come into awareness. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah.